Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Gigantic and its cancellation. This was a Disney animated classic that was going to be like the 59th animated classic, set to come out originally in sort of spring 2018. It then got pushed back to Thanksgiving. Then they reshuffled Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen and pushed it back to 2020, and now the Hollywood Reporter, as of time of recording, has said and had confirmation from the people over in Disney as well that it's been cancelled. It just didn't line up. It wasn't working. According to Walt Disney's animation group president, Ed Catmull, he said, sometimes no matter how much we love an idea or how much heart goes into it, we find that it is just not working. It's impossible to know when we begin a project how the creative process will unfold, and sometimes no matter how much we love an idea, it's just not working. With Gigantic, we've come to that point, and though it's a difficult decision, we're ending active development for now. We are focusing on our energies on other projects that have been in the works, and we'll be sharing for what is now set for Thanksgiving 2020. Disney quite often actually will dump an idea and bring it back decades later. So we could see Gigantic in 2040 if they'll go back and redo it and rework it out. This one's a bit odd. They announced it back in 2015. They've been working on this for probably 3-4 years. The fact that they have pretty much just thrown their hands up in the air and said this is just not working, it's not going the way they want, you have to think how much has already been done, but also are they just looking at it and going, they'd rather not put out a sub product, and rather than just I don't know, it's an odd one, this one.
It's definitely an odd one, but as you said, it's also not uncommon. I think you only have to look at, like, say, The Little Mermaid, which was put on production hiatus for literally decades, if I remember correctly.
Frozen was the same. Frozen was the same. I think Disney, even Walt Disney himself, I think, wanted to do a Snow Queen movie back in like the 50s, and that's what and some of the rides that they do, they quite often put on the burner and stuff. So that's not a bad thing. I think the fact that this movie's being pushed back so much, I don't know. Are they being a little bit thing of, we'll just do a sequel and we'll make more money, or is it just, are they looking at maybe at like what The Good Dinosaur, what went wrong with that? And because that was a movie that kept getting pushed back, they had development issues, the story changed, the actors changed, and it never set the world alight.
Yeah, The Good Dinosaur is still one of the big misfires for Pixar, at least in my book. It's the only Pixar movie outside of the Cars franchise that really just didn't resonate with me at all. So, and I think it also, of course, got overshadowed by Inside Out, which came out the same year. But, Gigantic, it's something that we could hear about again in the future. Yeah. It could also just completely disappear off the radar. Something like this, though, I strongly suspect that there's not any one single reason behind this. There were probably all sorts of things going on. Maybe they were having problems getting the music to line up with the theme. Maybe they were having problems with the script. Maybe the art wasn't coming together the way they wanted to. We'll probably honestly never know for sure, because stuff like this just tends to get buried. It's too bad, though.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
It depends as well of whether or not they can reuse some of the assets, because sometimes they'll do that. I don't know. It's a bit of an odd one. I don't know. Well, Jack and the Beanstalk is one of those kind of stories that, I don't know. I mean, there's been quite a few. I mean, they had that Jack the Giant Slayer movie that came out recently, and I don't know. It's that thing of, it's just, going back to these classic storylines. Do they work with today's audiences? Will that same idea, the general ideas generally stay around and they work? But we just don't know with this, and it's always odd.
It is, although the iconic stories, the classic stories, will probably always work in some form. It's just making sure that it's in a form that makes sense. Like, Rapunzel was a classic story, and Tangled was really one of the turning points for Disney in the last several years, when their animation department really started to come into its own again after probably a decade and a half of misfires, or not necessarily misfires, but things that didn't perform as well as Disney would have wanted. I know it really started with Princess and the Frog, but Tangled is really kind of, after that, everything has been fairly solid from their animation department.
I mean, I think that's the other thing, is if they're looking at going, this is just not working, it's not working right. The only thing I am like, it's like, okay, so this has already been shoved twice because of Wreck-It Ralph 2 and Frozen 2. I'm a little bit like, no, please try and keep doing original content, because we all know Hollywood at this precise minute is not working for sequels and reboots anymore. That's how bubble has burst and popped, and Disney have to do original stuff. But if this story just wasn't working, is it better for them just to literally go put it all in the archive and let's now just start work on a completely different idea? Because I'm sure they've got lots going, but Hollywood is I think even just movies as a joke in the last 3 years. What's in flavor now might not necessarily be in flavor in 3 years' time.
Right, and animated movies are notoriously long development times. So even if it would work in the modern audience, like you said, 3 years, who knows? The entire landscape of what audiences want could be completely different. And then there's, also the question, were Frozen 2 and Wreck-It Ralph 2, were they bumped up because Disney had more confidence in them, or did they get bumped up because this movie wasn't coming together and Disney realized they needed to change their resource allocation? Which came first, the Wreck-It Ralph or the Gigantic? We'll never know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also feeling very much with Disney as well. I actually think having one animated movie a year, actually, to be honest, is probably enough for them to push properly. I mean, I feel like with Coco coming out in a couple of weeks' time for you guys, unfortunately for us over here, it's going to be February. It feels like that movie's not quite, feels like, I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel like it might be different, but Disney don't seem to be pushing it as strongly as maybe other movies, because they sometimes can get a little bit safe with new franchises where they're not entirely too sure what to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've discussed that plenty of times in the past where, it does seem like they just kind of push movies out there and then decide whether or not we're going to support them. Zootopia, Big Hero 6 are two big examples of that. There's still almost no presence of those two movies or several other movies that came out in the last few years in their stores, in the parks. You don't see references them too much. I mean, now, we're starting to. Big Hero 6 is going to have its own TV show, and Baymax has become kind of his own star in his own right. But it took a while, and it took a while for them to acknowledge that. Yeah,
but yeah, Gigantic is a shame. I definitely wasn't expecting that news last night just before we recorded, because I mean, this was a subject when we were going to record of like, okay, yeah, Gigantic. That's them announcing a canned movie. You don't get that very often from Disney.
Yeah, normally they just kind of let them drift off the schedule. It wouldn't have surprised me if, it became a sequence of announces. Well, Thanksgiving 2020 is now going to be The Little Mermaid 4, and Gigantic has been pushed back to 2022, and then, it just kind of never gets mentioned again.
No, but also this is the same problem as well of when they are trying to hype movies so early in advance. They announced this back at 2015's D23. They are in this hype machine where they let stuff out a lot earlier than they probably used to. If you'd gone back 10 years, you probably wouldn't even known this movie was in production.
Yeah, and that's probably more of a symptom of the times where the 24-hour news cycle, we always need content to talk about rather than anything else. Because, I remember growing up, at least, obviously we wouldn't have been reading the magazines or the newspapers or whatever, but growing up, I didn't know what was coming out from Disney until, they released the VHS tape, and it would have the trailer for what was going to be the next Disney movie, because that was like, oh, we picked up Aladdin on VHS, and it's got the trailer for Lion King. What is this? And then, of course, the hype machine goes on. I think the only exception for that for me was I found out about Lilo and Stitch long before it got released because they had production sketches up for
Yeah.
it when I went through Hollywood Studios at the time called MGM Studios, and I was like, oh, what is this? And then I'd forgotten about it. 3 years later, the movie came out.
No, it's definitely, I think now, obviously, everything's a little bit more hyped up. But Gigantic, what do you guys think? How you know, it's always that kind of weird thing with it. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this. You can comment below. You can get in touch with us on social media. You can join our DisKingdom Lounge Facebook group as well for discussions about this. James, where can they find you?
You can find me heroiclegacy.com.
And on that note, guys, thank you very much for watching and listening, and we shall see you guys soon. Laters.
Later.